What if the most powerful man in Russia built his rise not on ambition, but on a name no one was allowed to say? A name that saved him. A name that shaped him. A name he was ordered to erase. This is the story of a shadow. Of a man whose file was burned, but whose voice still echoes in the corridors of power. Because in the world of secrets, what you forget isn't always gone. Sometimes, it's hiding in you. This is the memory Vladimir Putin was never supposed to remember. The assignment. It was early afternoon in 1976, in a nondescript Moscow KGB office. Paperwork and the distant hum of typewriters were routine, all carefully supervised, but identical. On that day, Vladimir Putin was still far from Kremlin corridors, yet close enough to feel their pulse. He was summoned to Colonel Ivanov's office, an austere room with dark wood paneling and a single portrait of Lenin above the desk. Something about that portrait always felt misaligned. Lenin's eyes seemed to follow the door. Putin stood at attention when the colonel entered, closed the door behind him, and placed a thick folder in front of the young lieutenant. "Open it," Colonel Ivanov said. Putin's fingers trembled ever so slightly as he lifted the lid. Inside was a sheaf of documents, personnel files. Names. Dates. Assignments. But the final page was blank, except for one handwritten line, in red. Remove all references. Erase the name. No name. No birth date. No job title. Just an order. Putin looked up. Colonel Ivanov didn't meet his gaze. "You know the procedure," Ivanov said quietly. Putin nodded. He left the office with the folder in hand and walked across the hallway into a cold storage room. The walls were lined with filing cabinets stretching from floor to ceiling. The faint odor of paper and dust. Inside the folder, he carefully removed each document. The original file, Sergei Mikhailov, born 1938, former East German liaison, transferred to Moscow in 1965. Under his name, commendations, reports, even a KGB service medal. Putin pulled out a pair of scissors. He cut the name off the top of every sheet. Then the birth date. Then the transferred location. What remained were empty pages. He stacked them and placed them in the shredder. The machine choked. He pressed harder. Metal and paper heat. But halfway, the folder slipped. He caught it. 4 words appeared at the file's top. "Remember me. Sergei Mikhailov." It was written in pencil. Faint. Almost hidden. The name sank in. He felt something tighten in his chest, like the first time he learned how power could castrate memory. That night, Putin went to a small cafeteria for dinner, a glass of tea, a slice of pie. He always ate alone. He opened a notebook, one of 2 he kept, the official one with training notes, and a second one, private, unlined, blank pages. He wrote, "To erase a name is to erase an identity. But who gives you the right to do that?" He paused. Rest of the page remained blank. That night, as he returned to his dormitory, he sensed someone was watching. But no one was there. He arrived at his table in the dorm lounge. On top, a single Polaroid pic of a middle-aged man in KGB uniform. Not Mikhailov's exact likeness, it was older. Stoic. Bore the same face shape, eyes, jawline. No message. No explanation. Just a photo. In red pencil, at the corner. He remembers. That's when the quiet began. The man who shouldn't remember. The photo sat on his desk for 3 nights. Putin didn't move it. Didn't report it. Didn't even mention it to his roommate. Because deep down, he recognized the handwriting. It wasn't from a file. It was personal. Familiar. Years earlier, in Leningrad, during his academy days, there had been a man. Not a teacher. Not officially. But one who visited the lectures unannounced. who pulled promising cadets aside, who asked strange questions not found in manuals. Sergei Mikhailov. Putin hadn't heard that name in almost 5 years. But now, the lines connected. This was no random erasure. This was targeted forgetting. On the 4th night, he walked to the record floor. He had access, barely. 1 level above him, and he'd have been flagged. Inside, dim halogen lights flickered like an interrogation lamp. He typed into the central archive terminal, Mikhailov, Sergei. Access denied. He tried again, Mikhailov. No results. Then, Mik dash. The screen flickered. Not denied. Not error. Just frozen. He stepped back. In the silence, a printer in the corner began to buzz. 1 sheet. He approached it cautiously. No header. No footer. Just 5 words. Stop searching. Watch your mirror. He turned. Behind him, nothing but his own reflection. But the hallway light outside had changed from yellow to red. Observation mode. He wasn't alone. The next day, Colonel Ivanov summoned him again. Same room. Same silence. No words were exchanged for almost a full minute. Finally, "You've been loyal, Vladimir." Putin didn't speak. Ivanov leaned in. "There are things you're too young to carry. Let them rest." Then, softer. "Some names erase themselves, if you let them." Putin nodded. He lied. That night, he returned to his private notebook. He drew a diagram, Mikhailov's timeline. Known locations. Possible allies. At the center, he drew a circle. Inside, a question mark. Then, outside the circle, he wrote, "Why did he save me?" Because that memory, that's what they couldn't erase. 10 years ago, in a train station fight, 2 men had cornered him. It was Sergei who intervened. Not with violence. With a badge. Fake, maybe. But it worked. Putin never forgot the look in the man's eyes. Neither fear nor pity. Just calculation. Like he saw something in Putin worth preserving. Now they wanted that name gone. And for the first time in his career, Vladimir Putin felt something worse than fear. Gratitude that couldn't be spoken. The archive that didn't burn. They thought the fire had destroyed everything. It hadn't. 3 years before Putin was handed Sergei Mikhailov's file, an off-site records facility near Riga had partially burned. Official cause, electrical malfunction. Unofficial truth, a cleansing operation gone wrong. But like all imperfect cover-ups, something always remained. Ash doesn't erase ink. Not entirely. Through an old contact at the academy, Lev, a quiet man with a nervous cough, Putin received coordinates. A rural town 2 hours west of Moscow. No street names. Just a building, concrete, windowless, half-collapsed. Inside were shelves. Rotten with mold. Boxes labeled in handwriting, not stamps. Personal archives. He moved carefully, flashlight in one hand, gloves on. Mice scattered in the corners. In the 3rd row, halfway down, he saw it. Mikhailov, SM. He opened the box. Inside, 6 folders, each labeled with a code name, not a real name. But he recognized them. Cadets. From Leningrad. All marked, influenced by Asset SM. Putin froze. He saw his own initials in the margin of one file. VP, high impressionability noted. Recommended monitoring. Then, stapled to the back. A photo. Him. Age 21. Walking beside Mikhailov. Unaware of the camera. He remembered that day. He thought the man had just appeared. Now he realized, it was orchestration. He pocketed the photo. Suddenly, a creak echoed through the room. Not rats. Not structure. Boots. Someone else was inside. He killed the flashlight. Waited. Footsteps passed the row. Then stopped. A whisper. "You're not supposed to be here, Vladimir." It was Lev. But his voice wasn't nervous. It was cold. They sat in silence, facing one another. Lev lit a cigarette. "You want to know why Mikhailov disappeared?" Putin stayed quiet. He volunteered. Putin raised an eyebrow. Lev exhaled smoke through his nose. He saw something coming. Said some names needed to vanish before they became problems. Putin leaned forward. "What names?" Lev shrugged. "Yours. Mine. A few others." Putin's voice barely cracked. "He wanted to protect us?" Lev didn't smile. Didn't nod. "He wanted to shape you. Like he was shaped." Then Lev stood up. Dropped a key on the table. Box 12. Basement level. Putin descended. No lights. No guards. Just the sound of his own breath. Box 12 was rusted shut. He forced it open. Inside, one single item. A cassette tape. Labeled in Cyrillic. To be played when he remembers. The voice that tried to warn him. The cassette tape was old. Dust crusted the reels. No label beyond the one line in fading ink. To be played when he remembers. Putin held it in his palm as though it might vanish. But it didn't. It was real. And he was ready. He found an old player in the storage room of his flat. The kind once used in language labs. Analog. Heavy. He locked the door. Pulled the curtains. Placed the tape in the machine. Pressed play. At first, nothing. Then static. Then, his voice. Not Putin's. Mikhailov's. "If you're hearing this, then they let you remember." The voice was calm, not like a man hiding. More like a man waiting. "I never told you why I approached you. Why I pulled you aside. It wasn't your loyalty. It wasn't your record. It was your eyes. You looked unfinished. Like someone had carved the shape of something powerful but hadn't filled it in yet." Putin leaned forward. "I saw in you what I feared in myself. Will without anchor. Fire without story. So I gave you one. Me. They'll erase me. That's certain. But maybe they'll leave you a crack. And through that crack, you might ask the right question. Not who was I, but why was I removed? Because the ones they erase are the ones who write the next chapter." The tape clicked. Stopped. Putin didn't move for a full minute. He rewound it. Played it again. Same voice. Same calmness. And at the end, a faint sound not noticed the first time. A door closing. Soft. Final. That night, he walked the city alone. Past guards, patrols, monuments to stories only half true. Every man he passed. Every bureaucrat, every officer. He wondered. Who else had heard the voice? Who else had erased someone they once needed? The next morning, Colonel Ivanov found a sealed envelope on his desk. Inside, a photo. Putin, age 21, beside Mikhailov. And a note. "We never forget the names. We only hide them in others." Putin was transferred the next week. No explanation. No ceremony. He never asked. And no one spoke of Mikhailov again. But in his private drawer, inside a black notebook, one name remained. Penciled lightly. SM. No first name. No rank. Just initials. Because the man was gone. But the influence stayed. The memory that outlived the file. Years passed. Vladimir Putin rose. From field officer to analyst. From deputy to director. Then, the presidency. But with every elevation, one detail remained unchanged. A notebook. Locked in a drawer inside every office he moved through, whether in St. Petersburg or the Kremlin. Inside, only two things. A photo. And 3 letters, SM. On his 50th birthday, during a private retreat near Lake Valdai, he asked for no ceremony. Only silence. He walked alone by the shore. A cold breeze. Mist crawling across the lake like a veil. And in his coat pocket, still, the cassette. He hadn't played it in years. He didn't need to. He remembered every word. The past didn't fade. It calcified. Not like a wound, but like a scar you stop noticing, until someone says the name. That never happened again. No one ever said Mikhailov's name. Not even in whispers. That's how perfect the erasure had been. And that terrified him more than any Western threat. Because if he could be erased, so could anyone. He'd once believed power meant shaping the future. But now he understood. Real power was shaping memory. What people forgot. What they were told they never knew. What was never allowed to exist in the first place. Years later, during a midnight briefing, a young intelligence aide handed him a file. Just routine. Until he saw the name. Not Mikhailov. Not SM. But a name he didn't recognize, on a man who, in an old photograph, had his eyes, his posture, even the same scar above the eyebrow. Putin stared. This man died in 1984, he asked. Yes, sir. Burned archive from Riga. Recovered image. Putin said nothing. He flipped the file shut. But his heart skipped. Because he knew that photo. He'd seen it before. On a desk. In a folder labeled for removal. But the face in it wasn't Mikhailov. It was his. He returned to his private room that night. Opened the notebook. Looked at the photo. Noticed, for the first time, something scratched faintly behind it. He who erases enough, becomes the erased. No more initials. No more labels. Just silence. Because power had done what Mikhailov predicted. It had made Putin not just a man of control, but a man no longer certain of his own beginning. And in that silence, a memory lived on. Unnamed, but unforgettable. Some names disappear from history, but some are buried inside the people they shaped. If this story made you think, feel, or wonder, then join us for more untold truths and forbidden echoes. Speech balloon, what do you think really happened? Comment below. Thumbs up, like, and share if this left a mark. Bell and subscribe, because some stories are too quiet to be heard without you.